They thought she was just another statistic, a helpless teenager caught in the gears of a corrupt Southern court, destined for a cell before her life even began. Judge Harlan Voss didn't see a straight-A student. He saw a target. He thought he could plant evidence, ignore the law, and bury her under a 20-year sentence without anyone batting an eye. He was used to playing God in his courtroom. But there was one thing Judge Voss didn't check before he raised his gavel to destroy her life. He didn't check the last name on her birth certificate, and he certainly didn't know that the man picking up her one phone call was the Attorney General of the United States. Location, 4th Circuit Court, Oak Haven County, Alabama. Case number 24-CR-00912, the State versus Lena Washington. The air in the courtroom tasted like stale coffee and floor wax. It was an oppressive, humid heat that the rattling AC unit in the corner couldn't touch. To Lena Washington, a 17-year-old with braids pulled back into a tight, disciplined bun and a Yale sweatshirt turned inside out to comply with dress code, it felt like the inside of a coffin. She sat at the defendant's table, her hands trembling just enough that she had to clasp them together to stop the shaking. Beside her was Reed Clean, a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept since the chaotic arraignment. His suit was ill-fitting, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was a good man, Lena thought, but he looked like he was drowning. "Don't let him bait you," Clean whispered, shuffling through a stack of disorganized papers. "Judge Voss feeds on fear. Just look straight ahead. Don't roll your eyes, don't sigh, just breathe." "I didn't do this, Mr. Clean," Lena whispered back, her voice cracking. "The backpack wasn't mine. I told Officer Tate that 3 times. "I know, Lena, I believe you. But in this room, the truth is what Voss decides it is." A heavy door creaked open behind the bench. The bailiff, a burly man with a neck thicker than his head named Officer Ramsey, bellowed out, "All rise, the Honorable Judge Harlan Voss presiding." The courtroom shuffled to its feet. Judge Voss swept in like a storm cloud. He was a man of substantial girth, with a face flushed a permanent angry red and silver hair slicked back with severe precision. He didn't sit. He landed in his leather chair, surveying the room with eyes that looked like freezing water. Voss was known in Oak Haven as the hangman. He didn't just sentence people, he dismantled them. He adjusted his glasses and peered over the rim at Lena. It wasn't a look of judicial impartiality. It was a look of pure disdain. "Be seated," Voss grunted. He picked up the docket file as if it were contaminated. Case number 24-CR-00912, State versus Washington. Possession with intent to distribute a Schedule II controlled substance, specifically fentanyl. A lot of it. He let the silence hang. Fentanyl. The word carried a death sentence in the court of public opinion before the trial even started. "Mr. Clean," Voss said, his voice a slow southern drawl that sounded like gravel grinding on glass. "I see you filed a motion to suppress the evidence found in the defendant's locker. You claim this is an illegal search and seizure?" Clean stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Yes, Your Honor. There was no probable cause. Officer Tate opened Miss Washington's locker without a warrant, without consent, and based on an anonymous tip that was never logged into the system. This is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment." Voss let out a short, sharp laugh. He looked at the prosecutor, a DA Elena Drake, a woman with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Ms. Drake, what says the state?" Drake stood up, smooth and venomous. "Your Honor, as Officer Tate's report states, he observed the defendant acting suspiciously near the lockers, her nervous sweating, furtive glances. This constitutes exigent circumstances in a school environment where the safety of other students is paramount. The drugs were found wrapped in a gym towel. 500 pills, Your Honor. This isn't a mistake. This is a dealer." Lena gasped. "That towel wasn't mine," she blurted out. Bang! Voss's gavel hit the wood so hard, dust motes danced in the light. "One more word from you, young lady, and I will have you gagged," Voss snarled. "You do not speak in my courtroom unless spoken to. Is that clear?" Lena bit her lip until it tasted metallic. She nodded. "Motion to suppress is denied," Voss said, tossing the file onto his desk. "This court will not hamstring our brave law enforcement officers because of technicalities. We're moving to opening arguments now." "Now?" Clean stammered. "Your Honor, we haven't even received the full discovery packet yet. We were told this was a pre-trial hearing." Voss smiled. It was a terrifying expression. I run a tight ship, Mr. Clean. My docket is full. I have real criminals to deal with, and I won't waste taxpayer money dragging out the inevitable. We pick a jury soon. This is a railroad, Clean shouted, losing his composure. You are denying her due process. Officer Ramsey, Voss said calmly, take Mr. Clean into chambers for a little chat about contempt and take the defendant to the holding cell. I'm revoking her bail. Revoking? Clean screamed as Ramsey grabbed his arm. She's a minor with no prior. She's an honor student. She is a threat to the community, Voss declared, his eyes locking onto Lena. And in my town, we don't let poison pushers walk the streets no matter how innocent they try to look. As Ramsey grabbed Lena's arm, pulling her roughly from the chair, she felt the cold reality settle in. This wasn't a trial. It was a lynching by gavel. I need to call my parents, Lena cried out as she was dragged toward the side door. You get one call from the holding cell, sweetheart, Officer Ramsey muttered. Make it count. The holding cell was a concrete box that smelled of bleach and despair. Lena sat on the metal bench, her knees pulled to her chest. She was shaking violently now. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a cold, hollow terror. 500 pills. She had never seen a fentanyl pill in her life. She was the captain of the debate team. She spent her weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter. She was supposed to go to Georgetown in the fall. She closed her eyes and replayed the moment Officer Tate had slammed her against the lockers. Well, well, he had sneered, holding up a blue gym towel she had never seen before. Looks like we got ourselves a little kingpin. He had planted it. It was so obvious. But why? The heavy steel door buzzed and clanked open. A different guard, a younger woman who looked slightly sympathetic, walked in holding a battered cordless phone. Lawyer says you didn't get your call. You got 5 minutes. Don't make me regret this. Lena grabbed the phone with trembling fingers. She knew exactly who to call. She didn't call her mother. Her mother was in Paris on a business trip and wouldn't pick up an unknown number. She dialed the private line, the number very few people had. It rang. Ring, ring, ring. Come on, Dad, she whispered, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. Please, Dad, please pick up. The voicemail clicked on. You have reached the personal line of Garrett Washington. I am currently unavailable. Please leave a message. Dad, Lena sobbed into the receiver. Dad, it's Lena. I'm in Oak Haven. They arrested me. They said I had drugs, Dad. But I didn't. The judge, his name is Voss, he revoked my bail. He's putting me on trial today. Dad, please, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. She hung up, feeling like her lifeline had just been cut. The guard took the phone back. Sorry, kid. Time to go back up. The shark is waiting. Back in the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to hostile. A jury had been selected with suspicious speed, 12 people who all looked like they played golf with Judge Voss on Sundays. Not a single person of color sat in the box. Reed Clean was back, looking more disheveled than before. He leaned in close to Lena. I tried to get a continuance, he whispered. Voss threatened to disbar me if I filed another motion. Lena, listen to me. We are going to have to rely on your testimony. You're going to have to charm them. It's our only shot. Charm them? Lena looked at the jury. They were staring at her like she was a contagion. They've already decided. All rise. Voss returned, looking refreshed, likely having enjoyed a lunch paid for by the county. The state may proceed, Voss said, waving a hand lazily. Elena Drake walked to the center of the room. She didn't use notes. She pointed a manicured finger straight at Lena. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you see a teenager, a child, but deception has no age limit. The state will prove that Lena Washington is part of a sophisticated ring moving narcotics through our high schools. We will show you texts. We will show you the drugs. Texts? Lena whispered to Clean. I never sent any texts. Objection. Clean stood up. The defense has received no records of incriminating text messages. Voss sighed, cleaning his glasses. Overruled. Ms. Drake says she has them. I'm sure they'll be entered into evidence in due time. Sit down, Mr. Clean, before I find you in contempt again. It was a setup, a complete, total fabrication. They were going to create fake evidence, show it to a biased jury, and lock her away. Drake called her first witness, Officer Tate. Tate walked to the stand, chest puffed out, chewing gum. He swore to tell the truth, a smirk playing on his lips. Officer Tate, Drake asked, tell us what you found. Well, Tate started, looking directly at Lena, I received a tip. I went to the locker. I found the drugs, and when I confronted the suspect, she laughed. She said, "You can't touch me. My dad will buy my way out of this." The jury gasped. Lena shot up. "I never said that. That's a lie." "Sit down," Voss roared, slamming the gavel. "Bailiff, restrain the defendant." Officer Ramsey moved toward her, grabbing her shoulder with a grip that bruised. "She's out of control," Voss said, shaking his head at the jury. "Typical lack of respect for authority. The record will reflect the defendant's outburst." Lena slumped in her chair, tears streaming down her face. It was over. No one was coming. Her dad hadn't answered. She was alone in a room full of wolves. Suddenly, the double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They were thrown open with such force that they banged against the back wall. Boom! Every head in the room turned. Standing in the doorway wasn't a local lawyer. It wasn't a frantic mother. It was a phalanx of 6 men in dark suits wearing earpieces and sunglasses. They moved with military precision, instantly fanning out to secure the perimeter of the room. The local bailiff, Ramsey, reached for his belt, but one of the suits was on him in a second, a hand gently but firmly pressing Ramsey's chest back. "Federal agents," the lead agent announced, his voice cutting through the humid air like a razor. "Nobody moves." And then, walking through the center of the agents, came a tall man. He was wearing a navy blue suit that cost more than Judge Voss's car. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand. His face was a mask of cold, terrifying fury. He walked straight down the center aisle, ignoring the gasp of the crowd. He stopped at the railing, looking first at the terrified Lena, giving her a single reassuring nod, and then slowly turning his gaze up to the bench. Judge Voss's face turned a shade of purple. "Now see here, who the hell do you think you are busting into my courtroom? I'll have you arrested for—" The man didn't shout. He didn't have to. He spoke with the quiet, devastating authority of a man who commanded armies of lawyers. "Harlan Voss," the man said, "I suggest you put that gavel down before you add obstruction of justice to the long list of felonies you're committing today." "Who are you?" Voss sputtered, standing up. The man placed his briefcase on the defense table and opened it. He pulled out a gold badge, holding it up for the room to see. "I'm Garrett Washington," he said. Lena's father. He paused, letting the silence stretch. "And I am the Attorney General of the United States." The silence that followed Garrett Washington's declaration was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for the aftermath of a gunshot. Judge Harlan Voss, a man who had ruled Oak Haven County like a feudal lord for years, blinked. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. He looked at the gold badge, then at the man holding it, and finally at the terrified girl in the defendant's chair. "The Attorney General," Voss repeated, the words tasting like ash. He tried to muster his usual bluster, puffing out his chest. "Now look here, Mr. Washington. I don't care who you are in D.C. This is a state court. You have no standing here. You are not a member of the Alabama Bar." Garrett Washington closed his briefcase with a sharp snap. He walked over to Reed Clean, the stunned public defender. "Mr. Clean," Garrett said, his voice calm but carrying to the back of the room, "I would like to petition the court to appear pro H.A.C. Vice as co-counsel for the defense. I am a member in good standing of the federal bar and the bar of the District of Columbia. Do you accept my assistance?" Clean, looking like he'd just been thrown a life raft in the middle of a hurricane, nodded frantically. Yes, I move to admit Garrett Washington as co-counsel." Garrett turned back to Voss. "The motion has been made, Judge. Unless you can cite a specific statute barring me from representing my daughter, I suggest you grant it, or we can discuss the deprivation of rights under color of law." Title 18 U.S. Code Section 242, a federal crime you are currently flirting with. Voss's face went from purple to a sickly pale. He looked at Elena Drake, the prosecutor. She was staring at her desk, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. "Granted," Voss choked out. "Sit down." Garrett didn't sit. He walked over to Lena. He placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing tight. "It's going to be okay, baby girl," he whispered. "I'm here. Breathe." He then turned his attention to the witness stand. Officer Tate was still sitting there, but the smirk was gone. He looked like a trapped animal. He was sweating so profusely that his uniform collar was turning dark. "Mr. Tate," Garrett said, pacing slowly in front of the jury box. The jury, previously bored and hostile, was now leaning forward, captivated. "You testified earlier that you received an anonymous tip regarding my daughter." "That's right," Tate said, his voice cracking. "Standard procedure." "Standard procedure," Garrett repeated, tasting the words. "And this tip? It came to the station landline or your personal cell?" "Station line," Tate lied quickly. Garrett stopped pacing. He pulled a sleek black tablet from his briefcase. He tapped the screen a few times. "That's interesting," Garrett said without looking up, "because I have a team of FBI cyber forensics analysts currently sitting in a van outside. They just pulled the call logs for the Oak Haven Police Department." Tate swallowed hard. "There was no call to the station regarding a tip at the time you claimed," Garrett said, his eyes snapping up to meet Tate's. "In fact, the only call logged to the station during that hour was a pizza delivery order." "Maybe it was my personal cell," Tate stammered. "I get mixed up. Your personal cell." Garrett nodded. "We have that too. We obtained a FISA warrant for your telecommunications data based on probable cause of a conspiracy to violate federal civil rights." The entire courtroom gasped. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a second. "And guess what, Officer Tate?" Garrett stepped closer to the stand, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "There was no incoming call on your cell either, but there was an outgoing text message sent 2 minutes before you raided my daughter's locker." Garrett turned the tablet around to face the jury. A blown-up graphic of a text message chain was displayed. "You sent a text to a number ending in 5590, Garrett read. "The text says, 'Package is planted, going in for the show now.'" Elena Drake, the prosecutor, knocked her water glass over. It shattered on the floor, but no one looked at her. "Who owns the number ending in 5590, Officer Tate?" Garrett asked. I don't know," Tate whispered. "I do," Garrett said. He turned slowly, his eyes locking onto the bench. He raised a finger and pointed directly at Judge Harlan Voss. "It's the judge's burner phone." Chaos erupted. Judge Voss stood up so fast his chair toppled over backward. "This is preposterous. This is an ambush. I will hold you in contempt." "Bailiff, arrest this man." Officer Ramsey looked at Garrett Washington. Then he looked at the 6 federal agents standing like statues along the walls, their hands hovering near their waistbands. Ramsey slowly took a step back, raising his hands in the air. "I ain't doing that, Judge. I'm just here for the paycheck." "Smart man," Garrett said. He turned back to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a drug trial. This is a kidnapping. My daughter was targeted not because she committed a crime, but because this court needed a body to fill a cell." "Objection!" Elena Drake shrieked, finally standing up. She looked desperate, her hair coming loose from its clip. "This is speculation. Defense counsel is testifying." "I'm not testifying, Ms. Drake," Garrett said coolly. "I'm laying the foundation for impeachment." He turned back to Officer Tate, who was now weeping openly on the stand. "Officer Tate, let's talk about the fentanyl. 500 pills? That's a lot of drugs. Street value of roughly $10,000. Where did a 17-year-old girl get that kind of capital? Or where did you get it?" "I found it in her locker," Tate insisted, though he sounded like a child caught stealing cookies. "Did you?" Garrett tapped his ear. "My team just accessed the inventory logs of the Oak Haven evidence locker, case number 23-CR-00004, a drug bust. The log shows you signed out a sample for training purposes, 500 pills exactly." Garrett walked over to the prosecution table and picked up the evidence bag containing the drugs. He held it up to the light. "If we dust this bag for prints inside the plastic on the pills themselves, are we going to find Lena's fingerprints, or are we going to find yours?" Tate looked at the judge, panic in his eyes. "You said you'd protect me. You said it was an easy win." "Shut up, you idiot," Voss roared from the bench. "No, keep talking," Garrett said, leaning on the witness stand railing. "Officer Tate, you are currently looking at a federal indictment for perjury, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. That carries a mandatory minimum of 15 years in federal prison, not the county jail. Federal prison." Garrett leaned in close. "But if you cooperate right now, if you tell us why you did this, I might be able to talk to the U.S. attorney for this district about a plea deal." Tate crumbled. It was instantaneous. The tough cop facade dissolved into a puddle of fear. "It's the contract," Tate blurted out. "The detention center contract." "The detention center contract," Voss screamed. "I don't care, Harlan." Tate yelled back at the judge. "I'm not going to federal prison for you." Tate looked at the jury, tears streaming down his face. The judge and the sheriff, they have a deal with the private juvenile detention center in Birmingham, the secure youth facility. The facility gets paid by the state per head per night, but they were under capacity. If they dropped below 80% occupancy, they lost their state funding bonus. A murmur of horror rippled through the courtroom. "They needed bodies," Tate sobbed. "They needed kids with clean records so the sentences would be longer. Rehabilitation time, they call it. We were told to target the smart ones, the ones who wouldn't fight back physically, the ones whose parents didn't have money for good lawyers." Garrett Washington's face was made of stone, but his eyes burned with a fire that could scorch the earth. He looked at Lena. She was staring at him, her mouth agape. She realized now that she hadn't just been unlucky. She had been hunted. "So you picked Lena," Garrett said softly, "because she was on the debate team, because she was polite." "We thought she was safe," Tate whispered. "We ran a background check on the name Washington. It's a common name. We didn't know. We didn't check the parents' social security numbers until after she was booked. We just saw a single mother on the school contact form." "My wife uses her maiden name for work," Garrett said. "A detail that saved your life today, Tate, because if I hadn't gotten that call—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Garrett turned to the judge. Voss was slumped in his chair, defeated. "Your Honor," Garrett said, his voice dripping with irony, "I move to dismiss all charges against Lena Washington with prejudice." Voss didn't answer. He just stared at the desk. "I said," Garrett's voice boomed like a cannon, "I move to dismiss." "Dismissed," Voss whispered. "Case dismissed." "Good," Garrett said. "Now, Officer Ramsey." The bailiff straightened up. "Yes, sir. You can arrest the defendant now." Ramsey looked confused. "But you just got her off." "Not her." Garrett pointed a long finger up at the bench. "Him." At that moment, the 6 federal agents moved. They didn't walk. They swarmed. 2 of them vaulted the railing of the gallery. 2 more went for the prosecutor, Elena Drake, the last 2 headed straight for the bench. "Harlan Voss," the lead agent announced, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for racketeering, federal conspiracy, deprivation of rights, and wire fraud." Voss tried to run. He actually tried to scramble back toward his chamber's door, but he was an overweight man in heavy robes. The agents caught him before he reached the doorframe. They spun him around and slammed him face first onto the judicial bench, the very surface he had used to ruin so many lives. The sound of the cuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the silent courtroom. "You can't do this," Voss screamed, his face pressed against the wood. "I am a judge. I am the law in this county." Garrett Washington walked up the steps to the bench. He leaned down, bringing his face inches from Voss's. "Not anymore," Garrett whispered. "Now you're just a defendant." Garrett stood up and looked at the courtroom. He looked at the stunned jury. "This court is adjourned," Garrett declared. He walked back to the defense table. Lena jumped up and threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. She sobbed, her whole body shaking with the release of the tension. "I got you," Garrett said, holding her tight, kissing the top of her head. "I got you. Let's go home." But as they turned to leave, the double doors opened again. This time it wasn't federal agents. It was the press, hundreds of them. The steps of the Oak Haven County Courthouse were usually quiet, frequented only by pigeons and the occasional lawyer smoking a cigarette. Today, it was a sea of microphones, cameras, and satellite vans. The news had broken within minutes of the FBI entering the building. The U.S. Attorney General has just arrested a sitting judge in Alabama. As Garrett guided Lena out the front doors, the roar of the press was deafening. "Mr. Washington, is it true the judge was planting evidence? Lena, how does it feel to be free?" "Mr. Attorney General, are you declaring war on the Alabama judiciary?" Garrett held up a hand. The gesture was commanding enough to silence the front row of reporters. He didn't smile. He adjusted his suit jacket, keeping one arm firmly around his daughter's shoulders. "My daughter," Garrett began, his voice picked up by a dozen microphones, "was the victim of a criminal conspiracy orchestrated by the very people sworn to protect her. Today, justice was served. But let me be clear, this is not the end. This is the beginning. We are opening a full federal investigation into the conduct of the Oak Haven Judicial Circuit and the Oak Haven Police Department. If you are a public official in this county and you have violated the public trust, I suggest you hire a lawyer. A very good one." He turned and guided Lena toward the waiting black SUV. As the heavy door slammed shut, cutting off the noise of the crowd, Lena finally let out a long breath. She slumped against the leather seat, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a physical blow. "It's over, right?" she asked quietly, looking out the tinted window at the blurring faces of the reporters. "We can just go home." Garrett looked at his daughter. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the loss of innocence that had happened so suddenly. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to take her back to D.C., wrap her in a blanket, and pretend this never happened. But his phone buzzed. It was a secure text from the special agent in charge, Kowalski. Subject, Voss's safe. Message, you need to see this. We found a ledger. It's not just Lena, it's hundreds of kids. Garrett sighed, the weight of his office settling back onto his shoulders. We're going home soon, honey. But first, we have to make sure they can't do this to anyone else. They didn't go to the airport. The convoy of SUVs drove to the local FBI field office in Birmingham. The war room was already set up. Whiteboards were covered in photos, timelines, and financial diagrams. Agent Kowalski, a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, met them at the door. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He handed Garrett a photocopy of a handwritten ledger found in Judge Voss's private wall safe. It's a butcher's bill, sir, Kowalski said grimly. Garrett scanned the pages. It was a list of names, dates, and dollar amounts. J. Miller, 12 months, $5,000. S. Gonzalez, 18 months, $7,500. L. Washington, 24 months, targeted $10,000. $10,000, Garrett whispered. That was the price of my daughter's life. 10 grand. It gets worse, Kowalski said, pointing to a column on the right side of the page. Voss wasn't keeping all the money. He was splitting it. 50% to him, 10% to Sheriff Tate, and 40% to the architect. Who is the architect? Garrett asked, his eyes narrowing. We don't know yet, Kowalski admitted, but we found wire transfers going from the detention center's parent company, Ironclad Solutions, to a shell corporation in the Caymans. The shell corp is called Blueprint LLC. Whoever owns that shell is the one pulling the strings. Garrett looked at the whiteboard. Ironclad Solutions. It was a multi-billion-dollar private corrections firm. They ran juvenile detention centers all over the South. Bring in Elena Drake, Garrett said, his voice cold. The prosecutor. She was in the courtroom. She knows how the game is played. If she wants to avoid sharing a cell with Voss, she's going to tell us who the architect is. The interrogation room was cold and sterile. Elena Drake sat at the metal table, stripped of her expensive suit and her arrogance. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit provided by the U.S. Marshals. She looked small. Garrett Washington walked in alone. He carried a single file folder. He sat down opposite her and placed the folder on the table. He didn't open it. Ms. Drake, Garrett said softly, you have a law degree from the University of Alabama. You were top of your class. You know exactly what federal RICO charges look like. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. 20 years minimum. No parole. Drake was trembling. I was just following orders, she whispered. Voss? He controlled everything. If I didn't play ball, he'd ruin my career. He'd make sure I never won a case. I don't care about your career, Garrett said, leaning forward. I care about the 300 children you helped send to ironclad facilities on trumped-up charges. 300 lives, Elena. He opened the file. It contained pictures of the children. Lena's picture was on top. I can't help you with the time you've already earned, Garrett said, but I can stop it from becoming a life sentence. I need a name. Was there so much? Yes. Who is the architect? Is Bapu Charka for that? Drake swallowed hard. She looked at the mirror, knowing the FBI was recording everything. If I tell you, she whispered, he'll kill me. He has connections everywhere, state troopers, the governor's office. I am the Attorney General of the United States, Garrett said. I have the entire might of the federal government behind me. You are safer with me than you are with him. Give me the name. Drake closed her eyes. A tear leaked out. It's not a him, she said softly. It's a her. Garrett paused. Who? State Senator Lydia Hargrove. Drake breathed. She sits on the Appropriations Committee. She pushes the contracts for Ironclad Solutions. She gets the kickbacks through the Cayman accounts. She calls herself the architect because she built the pipeline. School to prison. She designed it. Garrett felt a chill run down his spine. Lydia Hargrove, the law and order candidate, the woman who was currently polling ahead in the race for governor. She campaigned on being tough on juvenile crime. Now he knew why. Every kid she locked up was a deposit in her bank account. Garrett stood up. Get her into witness protection, he told the mirror. Now. He walked out of the room, his mind racing. Arresting a rural judge was one thing. Indicting a popular state senator and future governor was a political nuclear bomb. He needed irrefutable proof. The word of a disgraced prosecutor wouldn't be enough. Kowalski, Garrett barked as he entered the war room. We need the financial link. Drake gave us Hargrove, but we need the money trail. We're trying, sir, Kowalski said, typing furiously at a terminal. But Blueprint LLC in the Caymans is a fortress. We can't pierce the corporate veil without a subpoena from a Cayman judge, and that takes time. We don't have time, Garrett said. Hargrove will know Drake flipped by the morning news. She'll shred everything. Lena, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the war room with a cup of hot cocoa, suddenly spoke up. Dad? Garrett turned. Lena, sweetie, I'm working. I know, she said, standing up. She walked over to the whiteboard where the schematic of the ironclad detention center was drawn. But I remember something from debate club. Debate? Kowalski asked, confused. Last year the topic was privatization of prisons, Lena said. I researched Ironclad Solutions. They have a weird clause in their user agreement for the inmate tablets. All communication, data, emails, messages sent by the guards, admin logs, it's all backed up to a central server. So? Kowalski shrugged. They'll just delete it. No, Lena said, her eyes lighting up. They can't. It's part of their state compliance contract. It has to be backed up to a third-party server, a redundant cloud server that Ironclad doesn't control. It's for audit purposes. Garrett looked at his daughter, a slow smile spreading across his face. And since it's a third-party server, it's not protected by their internal firewalls, Kowalski finished. And if the server company is US-based, we can subpoena it right now, Garrett said. Get me the name of that server company, Garrett ordered. Lena pulled out her phone and did a quick search. It's Cloud Vault Systems based in Seattle. Get the Seattle field office on the line, Garrett commanded. I want a warrant served on Cloud Vault. We want every email, every chat log, every financial document uploaded by Ironclad Solutions from the records. Later, the data came in. It was a flood. Terabytes of data. But the FBI analysts, fueled by coffee and determination, used keywords to filter it. Voss, Hargrove. Kickback. Bonus. Got it! An analyst shouted from the back of the room. On the main screen, an email thread appeared. It was from the CEO of Ironclad to a private email address lhargrove@hushmail.com. The subject line, Oak Haven Quota. The body of the email read, Senator, our numbers in Oak Haven are down 15% this quarter. If we don't get the occupancy up to 90% by the deadline, we lose the state bonus. Tell Voss to stop being lenient. We need fresh inventory. I've authorized the usual consulting fee to your Blueprint account. And there was the reply from Senator Hargrove. Understood. I'll make the call. We'll target the high school. Zero tolerance policy goes into effect tomorrow. You'll have your inventory. The room went silent. It was the smoking gun. A direct order to frame children to meet a profit quota. Garrett stared at the screen. The anger he felt was different now. It wasn't the hot fury of a father protecting his child. It was the cold, hard resolve of the law. Kowalski, Garrett said quietly, prepare the indictment and get the tactical team ready. Where are we going, sir? Garrett buttoned his jacket. We're going to the state capitol. Location, the state capitol rotunda, Montgomery, Alabama. Event, the Future of Alabama Gala. The rotunda of the Alabama state capitol was not designed for subtlety. It was designed for awe. Tonight, it was a cathedral of power. The towering white dome, illuminated from below by amber floodlights, seemed to glow with a holy fire. Beneath it, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, aged bourbon, and the metallic tang of old money. This was Senator Lydia Hargrove's night. She stood at the center of the room, a beacon in a tailored ivory gown that cost more than most of her constituents earned in a year. She held a crystal champagne flute, her smile practiced and predatory. Around her orbited the planets of her political solar system, wealthy land developers, private prison lobbyists, and the power brokers of the Deep South. Senator, a man with a thick neck and a diamond pinky ring, leaned in. The polls have you up by 12 points since the Zero Tolerance Initiative started. People love a law and order candidate. Hargrove took a delicate sip of champagne. People love safety, Frank. Or rather, they love the illusion of safety. And I sell the best insurance policy in the state. She felt invincible. She had the police, the judges, and the money. Outside the heavy oak doors of the Capitol, the night air was much colder. Garrett Washington stood in the shadows of the portico, adjusting his cufflinks. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing his charcoal gray suit, the one he wore when he argued before the Supreme Court. It was his armor. Beside him, Special Agent Kowalski checked the load on his sidearm, though he prayed he wouldn't have to use it. Behind them, 20 FBI agents in tactical vests with Federal Agent emblazoned in bright yellow across their backs stood in silent formation. They were the Ghost Squad, invisible until it was too late. "We have the perimeter secured, sir," Kowalski whispered, his earpiece buzzing with chatter. "Montgomery PD has been told to stand down. The governor has been briefed. He's not happy, but he's not interfering." Garrett nodded, staring at the closed doors. He could hear the muffled sound of applause from inside. It made his stomach turn. They were clapping for a monster. "She thinks she's untouchable," Garrett said quietly. "She thinks the law is something she writes, not something she obeys." "She's about to get a civics lesson," Kowalski replied grimly. "On your mark, Mr. Attorney General." Garrett nodded. "Open them." Inside the rotunda, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the podium. The crowd hushed as Senator Hargrove ascended the stairs, the train of her dress trailing behind her like royalty. She gripped the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces. "My friends," Hargrove began, her voice echoing perfectly off the marble walls. "We live in dangerous times. Our streets are not safe. Our schools are under siege by a generation that has forgotten the meaning of discipline." She paused for effect. The silence was respectful, heavy. "That is why," she continued, her voice rising with rehearsed passion, "as your next governor, I will not apologize for being tough. I will not apologize for building walls to keep the wolves away from our sheep. We must remove the bad apples before they rot the whole barrel." The applause started, a polite ripple that was meant to grow into a roar. But it didn't. It died in the throats of the donors in the back row. Heads began to turn. A murmur of confusion, then alarm swept through the room like a cold wind. The massive double doors at the entrance had not just opened. They had been thrown wide. The cool night air rushed in, extinguishing the candles on the nearest tables. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dark, was a phalanx of armed men, and walking in front of them, with a stride that ate up the distance, was Garrett Washington. He walked straight down the center aisle, the crowd parting instinctively. He didn't look left. He didn't look right. His eyes were locked on the woman at the podium. Hargrove squinted against the glare of the spotlight. She couldn't see clearly past the first few rows. "Excuse me, this is a private event. Security. Mom." Two state troopers stationed at the base of the stage took a step forward, hands moving to their belts. "Federal agents," Kowalski's voice boomed louder than the microphone. "Stand down. Hands where we can see them." The troopers froze. They looked at the FBI SWAT team, then at each other, and slowly raised their empty hands. They knew the hierarchy. Garrett didn't stop until he reached the base of the stage. He looked up at Hargrove. The distance between them was only 6 feet, but it felt like the gap between heaven and hell. "Lydia Hargrove," Garrett said. He didn't shout, but his baritone voice carried to the rafters. "I'm afraid your future has just been canceled." Hargrove gripped the podium so hard her knuckles turned white. She recognized him now. The father, the complication. "You," she hissed, her microphone picking up the venom in her voice. "How dare you barge in here? Do you have any idea who I am? I am a state senator. I am the next governor of Alabama." "You are a suspect," Garrett corrected, mounting the stairs. He walked onto the stage, invading her space, stripping away her authority with every step. "And I am the Attorney General of the United States. In this room, Senator, you are outranked." The crowd was paralyzed. Phones were out recording everything. The gala had turned into a crime scene. "This is political persecution," Hargrove shouted to the crowd, trying to rally her base. "He's trying to silence me because I'm tough on crime. He's trying to protect the criminals." "No, Lydia," Garrett said calmly, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded document. "I'm protecting the children you sold." He turned to the audience, holding the paper up. "This is a federal indictment," Garrett announced, his voice ringing with authority. "It charges Senator Hargrove with 24 counts of racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. For years, she has accepted kickbacks from Ironclad Solutions. She engineered a scheme to incarcerate innocent teenagers, children like my daughter, to fill beds for profit. She turned the Oak Haven judicial system into a human trafficking ring." Gasps erupted. The donors began to back away. The social contagion of scandal made them desperate to distance themselves. "Lies!" Hargrove shrieked, her composure shattering. She looked wild-eyed. "You have no proof. It's all hearsay." Garrett looked at her with pity. "We have the emails, Lydia. We have the bank records from the Cayman Islands, and we have the audio." He signaled to Kowalski, who held up a high-powered portable speaker connected to his tablet. He pressed play. The sound of static filled the room, followed by a voice. It was distorted, but unmistakably Hargrove's. The cadence, the arrogance, it was her. I don't care about the occupancy numbers, Frank. Just get the bodies. Tell Judge Voss to stop being lenient. If we don't hit 90% capacity, I lose my bonus. Target the high school. 0 tolerance. You'll have your inventory. Your inventory. The words hung in the air, toxic and undeniable. The room was deadly silent. The donors looked at Hargrove with horror. She wasn't a politician anymore. She was a predator. Hargrove stared at the speaker, her mouth opening and closing. The color had drained from her face, leaving her looking old and gray. That could be AI, she stammered, her voice trembling. That could be anyone. Garrett stepped closer, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. The metal glinted under the gala lights. You can argue that to a federal jury, Garrett said softly. Turn around, Senator. No, she whispered, stepping back. You can't do this to me. I'm the architect. I built this state. You built a cage, Garrett said, grabbing her wrist with a grip of iron, and now you're going to live in it. He spun her around. She didn't fight. The shock had robbed her of her strength. The sound of the cuffs ratcheting shut, click, 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 echoed through the silent rotunda. It was a sound of finality. Senator Lydia Hargrove, Garrett recited the Miranda warning, not as a formality, but as a victory lap. You have the right to remain silent, and for the sake of this state, I suggest you finally use it. As he marched her down the stairs, the flashbulbs exploded. Hundreds of them. The blinding white light captured Hargrove in her ruined finery, bowed, led away by the man whose daughter she had tried to destroy. Outside, the sirens wailed. The cherry blossoms along the Potomac had burst open in a riot of pink and white, their petals drifting like snow onto the walkways of Georgetown University. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. Lena Washington sat on a wooden bench overlooking the river. A thick textbook, Constitutional Law, Principles and Liberties, lay open on her lap. But she wasn't reading. She was watching a sculler cut through the water below, the rhythmic motion soothing her mind. She looked different than the girl who had sat trembling in the Oak Haven courtroom. Her hair was loose, blowing in the breeze. She wore a Georgetown hoodie and jeans, but the biggest change was in her eyes. The haunted, hunted look was gone, replaced by a quiet, steely resilience. I thought I'd find you here. Lena turned. Her father was walking up the path, holding 2 cardboard cups of coffee. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from working long days cleaning up a mess that spanned 3 states. But he was smiling. Hey, Dad, she said, taking the cup he offered. Decaf, you know it. Garrett sat down beside her, groaning slightly as his knees settled. How's the studying? Heavy, Lena admitted, tapping the book. We're covering Miranda versus Arizona today. It hits a little different when you've lived it. Garrett nodded, looking out at the river. I bet it does. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. I saw the news alert on my phone, Lena said softly. The sentencing hearing was today. Garrett took a sip of his coffee. It was. And Judge Voss got 15 years, Garrett said, his voice devoid of triumph, just facts. He tried to beg for leniency, cited his years of public service. The judge wasn't having it. He's going to a medium security facility in Florida. And Hargrove? Lena asked, tensing slightly. 25 years, Garrett said. She turned on everyone to try and cut a deal, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Ironclad Solutions is gone, Lena. We seized their assets this morning. We're setting up a restitution fund. Every kid they locked up, all 300 of them, is getting their record expunged. We're paying for their therapy, their education, everything. Lena let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a long time. It's really over. The corruption is over, Garrett corrected gently. But the work isn't. We sent a message, Lena. We showed them that no one is above the law. Not a judge, not a senator, and definitely not a prison corporation. Lena looked down at her hands. You know, when I was in that cell, I hated them. I wanted them to hurt like I was hurting. That's natural, Garrett said. But now, Lena looked up at him. I don't feel hate. I just feel determined. I realize that the law is just a tool. In Voss's hands, it was a weapon. In your hands, it was a shield. It depends on who is holding it. She closed her textbook with a sharp thud. "I'm going to law school, Dad," she stated. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. "I don't want to be a corporate lawyer. I don't want to make deals. I want to be a prosecutor." Garrett raised an eyebrow, surprised. "A prosecutor after what they did to you?" "Because of what they did to me," Lena said firmly. "We need good people on that side of the courtroom, Dad. People who check the evidence. People who see the person, not just the inventory. I want to be the person who stops the next Voss before he even picks up a gavel." Garrett looked at his daughter. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire he saw in the mirror every morning, but brighter, cleaner. He reached out and wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. He kissed the top of her head. "You will be," Garrett whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You'll be the best of us, Lena, the very best." A gust of wind shook the cherry blossom tree above them, sending a cascade of petals raining down. They laughed, brushing the pink flakes off their shoulders. Far away, in a cold concrete cell in Alabama, a cell door slammed shut on Lydia Hargrove. But here, by the river under the sun, Lena Washington stood up, picked up her book, and started walking toward her future. She was free, and she was just getting started. And that is the story of how one corrupt judge and a greedy politician tried to ruin a teenager's life only to realize they were messing with the wrong family. It's a terrifying reminder that power without accountability is the most dangerous weapon on earth. Judge Voss thought Lena was just a number. He forgot that behind every number is a human being, and sometimes behind that human being is a father who happens to be the Attorney General. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, or if you believe that justice should be blind to power but open to truth, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. It helps us expose more stories like this. Share this video with someone who needs to see the good guys win for a change. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications. We have a new story coming next week about a billionaire who tried to buy a small town and lost everything. Comment, "Justice served," down below if you think Voss got what he deserved. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.